Hey everyone, tonight we're going to dive into the sands of Egypt, and not just as a landscape, but as a living archive of everything that has come before. When most of us picture Egypt, we see the great pyramids rising from the horizon, or the Sphinx with its silent gaze fixed on eternity. But the truth is that those monuments are only the surface of something far deeper. Beneath the rolling dunes and the sun-baked valleys lies a world that has hardly begun to be uncovered, a world that has been waiting for thousands of years. The desert might look empty, but that emptiness is deceptive. It is a silence that hides voices, a surface that hides chambers, a blankness that hides names and faces we have not yet met. It's worth remembering that Egypt's history stretches across more than 3,000 years of pharaohs, dynasties and shifting kingdoms. Every one of those rulers demanded a resting place that would stand against time, and yet today, only a fraction of them have ever been identified. The sands are vast and the record incomplete. For every tomb that has been opened, there are others that must still be buried. It makes you wonder, how many kings and queens are still out there, their stories sealed away, their treasures still lying in the dark? And before we go further, let me ask you something. If you could choose just one lost tomb to be discovered in your lifetime, whose would it be? Would it be the legendary Nefertiti, the last Queen Cleopatra, or perhaps a forgotten pharaoh whose name we don't even know yet? I'd love to hear what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and please subscribe. We have many more journeys into the hidden corners of Earth's history still to come. The Valley of the Kings is perhaps the clearest example of this mystery. Nestled in the cliffs near Luxor, it is where the pharaohs of the New Kingdom chose to be buried, away from the eyes of thieves and enemies. Today, archaeologists have mapped 63 tombs in that valley. Some are massive, with corridors and chambers stretching deep into the rock. Others are small, unfinished, or damaged by floods. And yet, even with all this work, the valley feels incomplete. Scholars have long suspected there are more tombs hidden there. Corridors that collapse into sand, chambers still sealed by stone, entrances buried by rockfalls. In a place where excavation continues to yield surprises, the question is not whether more tombs exist, but simply how many and whose. That incompleteness can be felt across Egypt. We know the names of pharaohs from temple inscriptions, king lists and ancient records. We can trace the reigns of figures who changed the course of history. And yet when we try to connect those names to an actual body, a sarcophagus, a tomb, the evidence is missing. Some of the greatest figures of Egyptian history have never been found. It is strange to consider that Tutankhamun, whose name was barely remembered until Howard Carter broke open his tomb, is now one of the best-known pharaohs of all time, while figures like Nefertiti or Cleopatra remain invisible, their final resting places elusive. Standing in the desert, you can feel this paradox. The land is vast, but it is also fragile. Sand moves with the wind, burying entrances and revealing others. Whole cities have been lost beneath it, only to re-emerge centuries later. The Nile itself has shifted course over time, covering old settlements, drowning temples, and reshaping the edge of the fertile land. To search for a tomb in Egypt is to accept that the landscape itself is part of the mystery. What looks like bare desert may be a roof above hidden chambers. What looks like a hill may be a collapsed monument. Every dune could be a veil. And so we ask, who is still waiting out there? Imagine the desert at night, with the stars overhead and the sands stretching endlessly around you. Somewhere beneath those sands lies a king who once commanded armies, a queen who once wore gold and linen, a priest who once led rituals in the great temples. Their names might have been whispered in chants for centuries, then forgotten. Their tombs might still hold papyri that have never seen daylight, carvings that preserve entire stories of dynasties. These are not just relics, they are voices from a time so far removed from our own that they feel almost alien. Even the discoveries already made remind us how incomplete the record is. When the tomb of KV5 was rediscovered in the Valley of the Kings, no one expected its scale. It turned out to be a massive complex designed for the sons of Rameses II, a labyrinth of chambers extending in every direction. Before it was properly mapped, people assumed the valley was already well understood. And yet KV5 showed that the sands could still hold surprises beyond imagination. If such a vast structure could remain hidden until the 1990s, how many others might still be buried? Another thing worth thinking about is how much we owe to chance. Howard Carter only found Tutankhamun's tomb after years of fruitless searching, and even then, it was because a water boy tripped over a stone step that turned out to be the top of the entrance staircase. A small accident uncovered one of the greatest finds in archaeology. Without that stumble, the tomb might still be buried under sand. It makes you wonder how many other entrances lie just a few feet too deep, just a few meters beyond where someone has looked. Egypt's desert is vast, and archaeology is slow, precise, and patient. In a way, the land keeps its secrets by overwhelming us with scale, but the sands do not only hide, they also preserve. The air is dry, the soil poor in moisture. Bodies wrapped thousands of years ago still emerge with skin, hair, and jewelry intact. Scrolls survive, colours remain vivid, and carvings look fresh. Unlike many other ancient lands where rain and vegetation reclaim the traces of history, Egypt holds on to them. It means that when a tomb is eventually found, it can feel like stepping into a world that has been asleep rather than destroyed. The pharaohs who are still waiting are not dust, they are whole, simply hidden. This is what makes Egypt so haunting. We know the history is incomplete, we can list the rulers who should be out there, we can sense the gaps in the record, but we cannot yet see the full picture. The desert is like a library where half the shelves are sealed. We can read some of the chapters, but the rest are closed, locked away behind stone and sand. And until those doors open, we're left with the questions. Who are we missing, and why? As we move forward, these questions guide us. The Valley of the Kings, the lost queens and priests, the erasures and the treasures yet uncovered, they all point toward the same truth. Egypt is not finished speaking. Its sands are still heavy with silence, a silence filled with voices waiting to be heard. The story of the pharaohs is still unfolding, and the next discovery might change everything we think we know. When we think about Egypt, we often picture abundance. Tombs full of gold, mummies carefully wrapped, treasures that survived untouched for thousands of years. Yet just as striking are the absences, the gaps in the map, the rulers who shaped history, but for whom no burial has ever been found. The silence of what is missing can sometimes feel louder than the discoveries themselves. It is as though the sands are keeping a secret list, reminding us that for every tomb opened, another remains hidden. One of the most fascinating figures in this puzzle is Imhotep. He was not a pharaoh, but his influence was so great that he became something more than a man. Living around 2600 BC, Imhotep was the architect who designed the step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, a structure that changed the course of Egyptian architecture forever. It was the first monumental pyramid, built in stacked stone instead of mud brick, a leap forward that echoed through the centuries. But Imhotep was more than an architect. He was a physician, a high priest, a scribe. Over time he was elevated into legend, worshipped as a god of medicine and wisdom. And yet, for all his fame in life and divinity in death, his tomb has never been found. People have searched for it in Saqqara, convinced that such a man must have been buried with honour. But the sands remain silent. How does someone so pivotal simply vanish from the archaeological record? Another mystery lies with Amenhotep I, the second king of the 18th dynasty. He ruled during a time of stability, overseeing campaigns in Nubia and expansions of temple building. His mummy was once discovered and reburied by priests in the cache of Deir el-Bahari, where many royal mummies were hidden to protect them from tomb robbers. And yet, his actual tomb, the place where he was first buried, has never been identified. Scholars debate whether it lies somewhere in the cliffs of Dra Abu el-Naga, or perhaps in another unexcavated valley near Luxor. It is strange to think that a pharaoh once celebrated with temples and cults now has no known resting place. We have fragments of his legacy, but not the doorway into his eternal house. These examples remind us that Egyptian history is not a neat chain of discoveries. It is more like a broken necklace, with gems missing from the string. For every Tutankhamun or Seti I whose tomb has been located, there are others whose resting places have slipped into obscurity. Some may have been deliberately erased, their names chiseled out by enemies or their monuments dismantled. Others may have simply been swallowed by time, collapsed under landslides, or hidden beneath modern villages. The Nile itself has shifted course so many times that what was once desert may now be farmland, and what was once sacred ground may lie beneath towns and roads. The landscape conspires with history to keep certain figures hidden. It's worth pausing here to think about why these absences matter. A tomb is not just a collection of objects or a burial chamber, it is a time capsule. Inscriptions tell us how rulers wanted to be remembered. Wall paintings preserve the colours of rituals long vanished. Artifacts speak of daily life, trade, and technology. The body itself carries secrets in bones and DNA, secrets about lineage, health, even cause of death. When a tomb is missing, an entire library of information is missing with it. In some ways, the gaps are more tantalizing than the treasures already found, because they leave us with questions that cannot yet be answered. Imhotep and Amenhotep I are only the beginning. There are queens and pharaohs scattered across the centuries whose tombs remain elusive. Their names survive in king lists, in fragments of inscriptions, in stories carried down by Greek and Roman historians. But their final resting places are still somewhere under the desert. It is almost as if the sands are holding them back until the right moment, preserving them for a discovery that will shift the way we understand Egypt's long story. And that makes you wonder, how many of those still missing tombs lie only a few feet below the surface, passed over by explorers who never thought to look in the right place? If Imhotep and Amenhotep remind us how easily even celebrated figures can slip into silence, then the stories of Nefertiti and Cleopatra take that mystery to another level. These are names everyone knows, icons of beauty and power, yet their final resting places remain among the greatest archaeological enigmas of all time. Nefertiti stands at the centre of one of the most dramatic moments in Egyptian history, the Amarna period. She and her husband Akhenaten tried to overturn centuries of religious tradition, focusing worship on a single deity, the Aten, represented by the sun disk. For a short time, their city at Amarna was the beating heart of a new vision. Then it all collapsed. Akhenaten died, his successors restored the old gods, and the memory of the heretic pharaoh was attacked and erased. Nefertiti's role in this story is still debated. Some scholars believe she ruled briefly as a pharaoh in her own right. Others think she disappeared before the regime fell apart. What unites them is the simple fact that no tomb for Nefertiti has ever been found. Her name survives in art, in inscriptions, and of course in the famous bust discovered in Berlin. But her body, her burial, her afterlife house remain absent. The desert keeps her secret. The fascination with Nefertiti's missing tomb is not just about curiosity. If such a burial were ever discovered, it could unlock the Amarna period in a way that nothing else has. It might explain how power passed from Akhenaten to Tutankhamun. It might show us whether she did in fact reign as a female pharaoh. It might even hold intact treasures that escaped the waves of looting that swept through so many other tombs. In a sense, her absence has become part of her legend. The queen who vanished from history, waiting to be rediscovered. Then there is Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt, whose life and death have been told and retold for centuries. Her story is almost cinematic. Her alliance with Julius Caesar, her love affair with Mark Antony, her struggle to hold Egypt against the rising power of Rome. When the end came in 30 BC, she and Antony took their own lives, and according to ancient writers, they were buried together. Plutarch, Dio Cassius, and Strabo all describe a joint tomb, a final resting place for the last of the Ptolemies and her Roman lover. But where is it? In 2,000 years of searching, no one has been able to answer that question. The problem is partly geography. Much of ancient Alexandria, Cleopatra's capital, now lies under the sea. Earthquakes and floods have dropped whole quarters of the city into the Mediterranean. Temples, palaces, and streets are still being mapped beneath the waves. Somewhere down there might be the tomb described by Plutarch, yet others argue that Cleopatra chose a different location, perhaps outside the city altogether. In recent years, attention has focused on Taposiris Magna, a temple west of Alexandria, where archaeologist Kathleen Martinez has found intriguing clues. Coins stamped with Cleopatra's face, statues resembling Egyptian queens, sacred tunnels cut deep into the rock. Each find has fueled speculation that Cleopatra's elusive tomb might finally be near, and yet, the ultimate chamber has not been found. The queen remains hidden, her final gesture of secrecy still intact. The allure of Cleopatra's tomb is easy to understand. To stand before her burial would be to bridge two worlds, the ancient pharaonic tradition and the Greco-Roman age that ended it. It would be to come face to face with the last voice of pharaonic Egypt. Imagine the inscriptions that might lie inside, the treasures mingling Greek and Egyptian styles, the personal artifacts of a queen who has been mythologized for 2 millennia. And yet for now it is only imagination. The sands and the sea hold on to her story. These missing tombs highlight something profound about Egypt. Even the most famous names can be lost. Tombs disappear for many reasons. Some were looted in antiquity, stripped of treasures, and abandoned to collapse. Others were deliberately hidden by priests trying to protect mummies from robbers, moved from their original sites into secret caches. Some may lie beneath farmland or modern buildings, unreachable without massive disruption. Others might have been deliberately erased, names chiseled out, monuments dismantled, tombs left unmarked so that memory itself would die. The desert is not only a preserver, it is also a concealer. It's humbling to think how much chance plays a role in what survives. We know Cleopatra's story not because her tomb was found, but because Roman historians wrote about her. We know Nefertiti because her image survived in sculpture, not because her mummy was preserved. The balance of survival is fragile. If one bust had not been uncovered, if one papyrus had not been copied, if one earthquake had been stronger, entire figures might have vanished altogether. And so, the missing tombs are not just absences, they are reminders of how precarious history really is. And then there are the countless other rulers whose names barely register in popular memory, but whose tombs are also lost. Minor kings of intermediate periods, queens consort, co-regents, and children of dynasties. Their burials are out there somewhere, waiting. Some may have been small and unremarkable in their time, yet still filled with objects that would astonish us today. Others may hold surprises we cannot even predict, texts, rituals, or technologies that never survived anywhere else. The desert hides both the famous and the forgotten. In the end, this is what makes the idea of the missing tombs so powerful. They are not just archaeological targets, they are chapters of human history that have yet to be read. Each time a tomb is uncovered, it reshapes what we know. Tutankhamun, for instance, was a relatively minor pharaoh, yet his tomb transformed our understanding of ancient Egypt. If that was the impact of a minor king, what would it mean to open the tomb of Nefertiti, or to finally step into the chamber where Cleopatra and Antony were laid side by side? The possibilities are staggering, and they remind us that Egypt is still full of stories waiting to be told. The story of Nefertiti's missing tomb is more than an archaeological question. It is almost a myth in its own right, a quest that has captured imaginations for more than a century. If Imhotep's absence is baffling, and Cleopatra's is haunting, Nefertiti's is electrifying, because the traces of her life are vivid, but her end is wrapped in mystery. We know her face more than any other queen of Egypt, thanks to the famous painted bust discovered in Amarna, a portrait so lifelike that it seems to breathe across the millennia. We know her reign, shared with Akhenaten, when temples were shut down, gods were abandoned, and a radical new religion centered on the Aten was proclaimed. We even know that she bore 6 daughters and may have ruled in her own right for a time. But when it comes to her death and burial, the record goes silent. The woman whose beauty and power were carved into stone simply vanishes from the historical stage. In the modern era, that silence has inspired both scholarly theories and speculative leaps. The most compelling of these came in 2015, when British archaeologist Nicholas Reeves proposed something extraordinary. He suggested that Nefertiti might actually be buried behind the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb. Tutankhamun, or King Tut, is the one pharaoh almost everyone knows, his name synonymous with golden masks and dazzling treasures. His tomb in the Valley of the Kings, known as KV62, was discovered intact by Howard Carter in 1922. And yet, for all its fame, Tutankhamun's tomb is oddly small for a king. Compared to the sprawling corridors and grand halls of other pharaohs' burials, his resting place feels cramped, almost improvised, as if it was never meant for him in the first place. Reeves noticed something curious in high-resolution scans of the tomb's painted walls. Subtle lines and shapes beneath the plaster suggested the outlines of hidden doorways, sealed and painted over in antiquity. To him, these were not random patterns. They were architectural clues, hints that Tutankhamun's burial chamber was only part of a larger complex. His bold theory was that the young king had been hurriedly placed in an outer chamber of what was originally intended for someone else, and that the true owner, lying behind the walls, could be none other than Nefertiti. It's worth pausing on what such a claim means. If true, it would not only reveal the final resting place of one of history's most famous queens, but it would also transform our understanding of the Amarna period. Tutankhamun, after all, was Akhenaten's son. Nefertiti may have been his stepmother, or even his mother. Scholars debate this endlessly. To find them buried within the same tomb complex would be to step directly into the heart of that tangled royal family. It would mean the Amarna Revolution and its aftermath were not just stories and inscriptions, but events still sealed in stone. Following Reeves's announcement, excitement ran high. Egyptian authorities approved radar scans of the walls of KV-62, hoping to detect anomalies that might confirm the presence of hidden chambers. The results seemed promising at first. One team reported reflections consistent with empty spaces beyond the walls, perhaps even metallic or organic material. Headlines around the world speculated that Nefertiti's tomb was on the verge of discovery. For a moment it felt as though the desert was about to give up one of its greatest secrets. But as is so often the case in archaeology, the story was not so simple. A second team of specialists conducted their own scans, and their results contradicted the first. They reported no evidence of voids or doorways, suggesting that what Reeves had interpreted as architectural lines were simply natural features in the rock, or quirks of the plaster. The debate quickly became polarized. Was Nefertiti really hidden behind those painted walls, or was it all an illusion? The tomb of Tutankhamun, already one of the most famous discoveries in history, became the center of a new controversy. Not about what was found, but about what might still be waiting. What makes this question so tantalizing is how plausible it feels. Tutankhamun died young, around the age of 18 or 19, without much time to prepare his own tomb. His burial seems rushed, with evidence that some of the treasures were repurposed from others. Some scholars even argue that his golden mask may have originally been made for Nefertiti, its features slightly altered to fit a male ruler. If that were true, it would not be surprising if his burial chamber was also adapted from someone else's monument. And who would have had such a grand tomb in preparation at that time? Nefertiti herself. Even without proof, the theory has rekindled interest in the search for her. Archaeologists have scoured Amarna, the city she once ruled, looking for signs of a royal burial. Others have pointed to unopened areas of the Valley of the Kings, or to unfinished tombs nearby. Everywhere, the possibility of her presence seems to hover just out of reach. What keeps this search alive is not just the fame of her name, but the sense that her discovery would answer so many questions at once. Did she reign as a pharaoh after Akhenaten's death? Did she share the same fate of erasure that he did? Was she buried in splendor or hidden away in shame? A tomb could speak where history has gone silent. It's interesting to think about why Nefertiti has become such a magnet for speculation. Part of it, of course, is her image. That painted bust in Berlin has made her the very face of ancient Egypt in modern imagination. But part of it is also the drama of her time, the radical break with centuries of tradition, the clash between old gods and new. Her story sits at the crossroads of power, religion, and identity. To find her tomb would not be just another archaeological discovery. It would be like turning a key in a locked door that leads straight into the heart of Egypt's most controversial moment. And so the hunt continues. The radar scans are debated, the walls of KV-62 are studied and restudied, and the sands remain quiet. Yet the silence only makes the question louder. Where is Nefertiti? Somewhere in the valleys of Luxor, in the cliffs, in the desert plains, perhaps even beneath a modern village, her resting place must exist. The challenge is whether we have the patience, the technology, and the luck to uncover it. The debate over Tutankhamun's tomb and the possibility of hidden chambers behind its walls has continued for years, and in many ways it captures the essence of what makes archaeology in Egypt so compelling. On the one hand, there is the lure of discovery, the possibility that one of the greatest queens in history lies just beyond reach. On the other hand, there is the sober caution of science, reminding us how often the desert teases us with illusions. What looks like a doorway can be a crack in the stone. What appears to be an anomaly in radar can turn out to be nothing more than a shift in the bedrock. The conversation around Nefertiti has become a kind of mirror. Some see in it proof that treasures still await, while others see a warning against wishful thinking. For Nicholas Reeves, the outlines in the plaster were too precise to ignore. He argued that the ancient painters who decorated Tutankhamun's chamber were concealing something deliberately, that the walls were not simply walls but partitions hiding further corridors. Yet critics countered that the decorations were continuous, with no sign of interruption, and that the supposed outlines could be explained by natural variations. Each new scan brought a fresh wave of interpretation, and with each interpretation, the legend of Nefertiti's missing tomb only grew stronger. In a way, the uncertainty itself has kept her alive in popular imagination. If the walls had been opened and found empty, the story might have ended. But the lack of closure has ensured that speculation endures. This controversy also reveals something deeper about our relationship with Egypt's past. We crave discoveries not just for their academic value, but for the sense of wonder they inspire. Nefertiti is not just a historical figure, she is a symbol of mystery itself. To find her would be to pull back a curtain on one of history's most enigmatic moments. And so, the arguments continue. Some Egyptologists insist that her tomb must still be out there, but not in KV62. Others argue that it may have been destroyed, or that she was buried in a modest, unmarked grave to erase her from memory. Each possibility is plausible, and each one adds to the weight of the question. What makes the case of Nefertiti especially fascinating is that it connects so many threads of Egyptian history. She lived at the centre of the Amarna Revolution, a period when the very idea of divinity was rewritten. If her burial were found, it might contain inscriptions that explain the abrupt end of that experiment. It might show whether she ruled as a pharaoh under another name. It might reveal whether she was connected by blood to Tutankhamun, clarifying the tangled lineage of the 18th dynasty. It could even offer insight into how the Egyptians themselves tried to deal with the legacy of Akhenaten, the so-called heretic king. In short, her tomb would be more than a resting place. It would be a library of secrets. Consider how much we learned from Tutankhamun's tomb, even though he was a relatively minor figure. His burial revealed the craftsmanship of the time, the wealth of the court, the religious rituals that accompanied death. It gave us artifacts that became icons of ancient Egypt, from the golden mask to the chariots and jewellery. If that was possible for a young king who ruled only a few years, what would the tomb of Nefertiti reveal? She was a queen at the heart of a revolution, a figure of enormous influence. The idea of her treasures, her inscriptions, her body preserved after more than 3,000 years, it feels almost overwhelming. No wonder her discovery is often called the Holy Grail of Egyptology. And yet, perhaps part of the power lies in the fact that she has not been found. As long as Nefertiti's tomb remains hidden, she hovers in a liminal space, half history and half legend. She's both real and unreal, present and absent. The desert preserves her name but withholds her face beyond the bust in Berlin. It allows her to remain an enigma, a question that draws us deeper into Egypt's silence. Sometimes what is missing can be just as evocative as what is present. The absence itself becomes part of the story. There are, of course, other theories about her fate. Some suggest she may not have had a tomb of her own at all, that she was buried alongside Akhenaten in Amarna, their graves later destroyed when the city was abandoned. Others think her body may already have been found, misidentified among mummies labelled only as the younger lady, or the elder lady, in museums and storerooms. DNA testing has opened new doors, hinting at connections between unidentified mummies and known lineages, but even there, answers remain elusive. Each possibility solves one problem while opening another. And so, the Queen continues to evade us, her story unfinished. The search for Nefertiti also raises questions about how we interpret the past. Are we too eager to project our desires onto the evidence? Do we see what we want to see in radar scans and wall markings? Or is the persistence of these anomalies itself a clue, urging us not to dismiss the possibility? In a way, the search for her tomb becomes a reflection of how archaeology works. It is part science, part art, part patience, and part faith, a dialogue with the land itself. The desert does not reveal its secrets easily. It makes us wait, testing our resolve, offering hints but rarely full answers. Perhaps that is why the hunt for Nefertiti has endured for so long. She embodies the intersection of hope and doubt, of possibility and restraint. Every new theory, every new scan, every new excavation renews the hope that she might finally be found. And every disappointment reminds us that the sands of Egypt are patient. They do not give up their treasures on demand. They reveal them only in their own time. Imagine, though, what it would mean if one day the discovery is made, the sealed doorway is opened, the corridor explored, the chamber entered. The air that has not been breathed for more than 3,000 years rushes out, carrying with it the scent of ancient resins. There, in the glow of lamplight, would be the story of Nefertiti's final journey. For archaeologists, for historians, for the world at large, it would be a moment beyond measure. Not just another tomb, but a direct connection to one of the most remarkable women of antiquity. Until then, all we have is the silence, and the knowledge that somewhere beneath the sands the truth waits. In the summer of 30 BC, the world of Cleopatra VII came crashing down. For nearly 2 decades she had fought to keep Egypt independent, navigating alliances with Rome's most powerful men. She sailed the Nile with Julius Caesar, raised a son who carried his name, and later ruled beside Mark Antony in a partnership that was as much about politics as it was about passion. Together they tried to stand against Octavian, the future Augustus, who was tightening his grip on the Roman world. But when Antony's armies were defeated at Actium, Cleopatra's fate was sealed. Egypt would fall, and so would its last queen. The final act of her life has been told and retold for centuries. Plutarch describes Antony, mortally wounded, being carried to Cleopatra's mausoleum, where she and her attendants had barricaded themselves. He died in her arms, asking to be remembered with honour. Soon after, Octavian entered Alexandria in triumph. Cleopatra, knowing what awaited her, the humiliation of being paraded through Rome as a captive, chose death. Whether by the bite of an asp or by poison concealed in a comb, she took her life on her own terms. The queen who had once commanded fleets and armies now slipped silently into history. But the story did not end there. Ancient writers tell us that Cleopatra was buried with Antony. Plutarch, Strabo, and Dio Cassius all mention a joint tomb, a final resting place where the lovers would lie together. This was more than a gesture of sentiment. It was a deliberate act of defiance, ensuring that even in death they would not be separated. Octavian may have conquered Egypt, but Cleopatra claimed her ending. Somewhere in Alexandria, a tomb was prepared for the last pharaoh of Egypt and the Roman general who had staked everything on her. The problem is that we do not know where that tomb is. The descriptions left by ancient writers are vague, and the city itself has changed beyond recognition. Much of Cleopatra's Alexandria lies under the sea. Earthquakes and floods over the centuries dragged entire districts beneath the Mediterranean, including the royal quarter where the Ptolemies once lived. Palaces, temples, and monuments are now ruins on the seabed. Divers exploring the harbour have found columns, statues, and sphinxes lying in the sand, remnants of a city swallowed by water. If Cleopatra's tomb was in this part of Alexandria, it may now lie beneath the waves, unreachable except by underwater archaeology. The thought is haunting. Somewhere under the sea, in a chamber carved of stone, the last queen of Egypt might still be resting. Imagine swimming through the ruins of Alexandria, past fallen pillars and broken statues, and stumbling on a sealed doorway. Behind it, the bodies of Cleopatra and Antony, untouched since the day they were laid to rest. The idea is so compelling that it has fueled decades of exploration, but so far no such discovery has been made. The sea keeps its secrets as tightly as the desert does. Even on land, the mystery persists. Some argue that Cleopatra may not have been buried in the royal quarter at all. Strabo hints at a mausoleum already prepared before her death, perhaps away from the palace. The ancient temple complex of Taposiris Magna, west of Alexandria, has become one of the most intriguing candidates. This temple was sacred to Osiris, the god of the afterlife, and its name means Tomb of Osiris. To be buried there would have carried deep symbolic meaning, linking Cleopatra to the cycle of death and rebirth at the heart of Egyptian belief. It would also have been far enough from the centre of Roman control to keep her tomb hidden from desecration. For centuries, Taposiris Magna was little more than ruins on the edge of the desert. But in recent years, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez has led excavations there, convinced that Cleopatra's tomb may lie within or beneath the site. Her team has uncovered striking evidence: coins stamped with Cleopatra's face, statues resembling Egyptian queens, and sacred tunnels cut deep into the bedrock. Each discovery has brought fresh speculation. Could this be the place where she chose to be remembered? A temple of Osiris, a burial for the last pharaoh, a sanctuary away from prying Roman eyes? The search at Taposiris Magna has not yet yielded a definitive answer. No sarcophagus, no burial chamber has been found. Yet the finds are tantalizing enough to keep hope alive. They suggest that the area was of great importance in Cleopatra's time, and that members of the Ptolemaic dynasty may well have been buried there. The question is whether Cleopatra and Antony were among them. For now, the evidence is circumstantial, but it points toward a possibility that keeps drawing archaeologists back into the desert. What makes the mystery of Cleopatra's tomb so powerful is not just the question of where she lies, but what her burial would represent. To find her tomb would be to connect with the very end of Egypt's pharaonic tradition. Hers was the last name in a line that stretched back 3,000 years, from Nama and Khufu to Rameses and Nefertiti. When Cleopatra died, that world ended, and Egypt became a province of Rome. Her tomb, then, is not just a personal resting place. It is the closing chapter of an entire civilization. To stand inside it would be to witness the moment the ancient world gave way to the new. Still, for 2,000 years the sands and seas of Egypt have kept this secret. The ancient writers gave us only fragments, and the city itself has shifted and drowned. Every clue leads to another question. Was the tomb in the royal quarter, now lost beneath the sea? Was it in a temple of Osiris, hidden west of Alexandria? Or was it somewhere else entirely, erased by time? The absence has made the mystery even stronger, turning Cleopatra's burial into one of the great legends of archaeology. The excavations at Taposiris Magna have become one of the most closely watched archaeological projects of the last 2 decades. Kathleen Martinez, a lawyer turned archaeologist from the Dominican Republic, has devoted much of her career to this site, convinced that Cleopatra's tomb must lie here. When she first proposed the idea, many scholars were skeptical. Alexandria, after all, was the Queen's city. Why would she not have been buried in the royal quarter? But Martinez pointed to symbolism. The Temple of Osiris, god of the underworld, was the perfect place for a ruler who wanted to be remembered as divine, who wished to be bound forever to Egypt's sacred traditions. It was also the kind of location that could have escaped the destruction of time. Her team began digging in the early 2000s, and the finds quickly drew attention. They uncovered a cemetery of Greco-Roman tombs, filled with mummies wrapped in gilded cartonnage. Some were decorated with images of Osiris, Isis, and other gods of the afterlife, showing that the site retained deep religious significance in Cleopatra's era. Coins bearing Cleopatra's name and likeness were discovered in the temple grounds, anchoring her presence to the site. Statues of queens and priestesses emerged from the sand, their features weathered but recognizable. Every season seemed to add a piece of the puzzle. Perhaps the most intriguing discovery was a network of tunnels carved beneath the temple, stretching for more than a mile through the bedrock. Some were flooded, others collapsed, but their scale was undeniable. The ancient builders had gone to immense effort to carve these subterranean passages. Martinez believed they might have been part of a sacred complex, or even a hidden pathway to a royal tomb. If Cleopatra had wanted to hide her burial from prying Roman eyes, such tunnels would have been the ideal place. The image is compelling. Cleopatra, knowing the game was lost, arranging for her body and Antony's to be placed not in the royal quarter, where Octavian could display them, but in a temple dedicated to Osiris. There, in the darkness of the tunnels guarded by priests and sealed by stone, the last queen of Egypt would rest beside her lover, beyond the reach of Rome. It fits her story. A queen of spectacle, yes, but also of strategy. Always one step ahead until the very end. Yet the evidence remains frustratingly elusive. No burial chamber has been found at Taposiris Magna. The tunnels are difficult to excavate, some filled with water, others blocked by rubble. Each promising lead seems to end in another dead end. Martinez remains convinced that Cleopatra is there, but the proof has yet to surface. For archaeologists, this is the tension that defines the field, the balance between hope and patience, between possibility and reality. Meanwhile, attention has also turned back to Alexandria itself. Underwater archaeologists have spent years mapping the sunken ruins of the city, pulling statues and columns from the seabed. They have identified the remains of temples, palaces, and harbours, creating a submerged atlas of the ancient capital. Among these ruins might lie the mausoleum described by Plutarch, but locating it is like searching for a needle in a haystack. The Mediterranean has buried centuries of history under silt and stone. Visibility is poor, conditions treacherous. Still, the possibility remains. Each dive brings the chance of stumbling on an entrance, a chamber, or even an inscription that points the way. It's striking to think that Cleopatra's tomb could be either under the desert sands or beneath the waves, equally unreachable in different ways. The sea guards her as fiercely as the desert guards the pharaohs of Thebes. And this, perhaps, is part of the fascination. The queen who was always larger than life is still untouchable, still out of reach. Her tomb has become not just an archaeological mystery, but a symbol of longing, of the desire to connect with the past and the frustration of always coming up short. Why does her burial matter so much? Part of it is Cleopatra herself, a woman whose legend has been magnified by poets, playwrights, and filmmakers. But part of it is what her tomb represents historically. It would be the final chapter of 3,000 years of pharaonic tradition. Inside might be treasures blending Greek and Egyptian styles, inscriptions that reveal how she wished to be remembered, perhaps even personal artifacts from her life with Antony. To discover her tomb would be to stand at the threshold of two worlds, witnessing the moment Egypt passed from independence into Roman rule. There is also the possibility of human remains. Imagine, after centuries of speculation, coming face to face with Cleopatra herself. Her body preserved by Egypt's climate, her features still traceable after 2 millennia. Such a discovery would answer questions about her ancestry, her health, even the circumstances of her death. It could settle debates about whether the asp story was symbolic or literal, whether poison was involved, whether Octavian had a hand in her fate. It would turn legend into history in a way that few other finds could. And yet, we have to remember how fragile such hopes are. Many tombs have been looted, destroyed, or lost entirely. Even if Cleopatra's burial once existed, it may have been desecrated in antiquity. Octavian may have allowed her a joint tomb with Antony, but he would hardly have wanted to glorify her. Over the centuries, earthquakes, floods, and human activity could have erased it completely. The reason we still long for its discovery is because the possibility remains, because the sands and the sea are very good at keeping secrets. In the end, Cleopatra's missing tomb is less about closure and more about fascination. It draws us into her story not because it solves it, but because it refuses to let it end. Every coin, every statue, every tunnel whispers that she's still out there, waiting. Whether in the desert or beneath the waves, the Queen's final chapter has yet to be written. And until it is, we will keep searching, drawn by the same magnetism that made her unforgettable in life. Not every missing tomb is the result of shifting sands or chance. Some were lost because others wanted them lost. In ancient Egypt, memory was a weapon as powerful as any army. To erase a person's name, to destroy their statues, to dismantle their tomb. This was more than vengeance. It was an attempt to strike them from eternity itself. The Egyptians believed that as long as a name was spoken, the soul endured. Silence, therefore, was the ultimate punishment. Perhaps no figure embodies this better than Akhenaten, the so-called heretic king. Rising to power in the 14th century BC, he did something no other pharaoh dared. He abandoned the worship of Egypt's many gods and elevated a single deity, the Aten, represented as a radiant sun disk. Temples across the land were closed. Statues of Amun, Ptah, and Osiris were defaced. A new capital city, Akhenaten, was built from scratch on the banks of the Nile. For more than a decade, the old religious order was overturned, and Akhenaten ruled as high priest of a faith centered on light itself. After his death, the backlash was swift. His city was abandoned, his monuments dismantled, his name omitted from king lists. Later, rulers branded him a criminal and tried to erase his memory. The fate of his body remains uncertain. A mummy found in Tomb Kafov 55 has been identified by some scholars as Akhenaten, but the evidence is disputed. DNA tests link the body to Tutankhamun's family, but debate continues about whether it is the heretic king himself or another relative. If Akhenaten was reburied in secrecy, or if his original tomb was destroyed, then his burial is still effectively missing, a deliberate act of erasure designed to make the man vanish as though he had never lived. This practice of erasing the dead was not unique to Akhenaten. Other rulers faced similar treatment when politics turned against them. Hatshepsut, the powerful queen who declared herself pharaoh centuries earlier, had her images chiseled away by her successor, Thutmose III. Her temples survived, but her statues were smashed and buried, her name carved out of inscriptions. Though her tomb has been identified in the Valley of the Kings, the attempt to blot her out from memory shows how fragile immortality could be. The same stone that was meant to preserve eternity could be used to destroy it. When we consider the missing tombs of Egypt, we must remember that some were hidden not by accident, but by design. The politics of succession often determined who was honoured and who was erased. A pharaoh who fell from favour might be denied the monumental tomb expected of his station. Instead, his body might be placed in a modest grave, unmarked, or buried in secrecy by loyalists. Over time, such burials could vanish entirely, leaving no trace. The idea that some tombs remain undiscovered because they were meant to be forgotten adds another layer of intrigue. These were not simply kings and queens lost to shifting sand. They were individuals targeted by history itself, their legacies intentionally dismantled. To find one of their tombs would not only reveal physical remains, it would resurrect voices that others worked desperately to silence. Imagine stumbling upon a chamber that holds the remains of a ruler whose name does not appear in official lists, a pharaoh wiped from monuments but still preserved in flesh and stone. The inscriptions on the walls might tell a story that contradicts the official narrative. The objects inside might reveal a court, a family, or a reign deliberately excised from memory. Such a discovery would be like pulling back a curtain on Egypt's politics of remembrance, exposing the fragility of what we think we know. Even among the known tombs, evidence of these struggles can be seen. The Valley of the Kings holds monuments that were vandalized in antiquity, names hacked out, reliefs damaged. In some cases, tombs were usurped by later rulers, who carved their own names over the original inscriptions, claiming eternity for themselves while erasing their predecessors. Eternity, in Egypt, was not a guarantee. It had to be defended, and sometimes it was stolen. The missing tombs tied to political erasure may be the most challenging to locate. Unlike the vast monuments built to proclaim power, these burials were meant to be concealed. They may lie in places archaeologists have not thought to look, shallow graves, hidden shafts, or even caches disguised as ordinary pits. If they are found, they may not glitter with gold, but they could shine in another way, by filling the silences that official history imposed. The case of Akhenaten shows how a pharaoh's memory could be dismantled, but he was not alone. Egyptian history is full of rulers who were deliberately pushed into silence, their tombs unmarked, their names scratched away. Each of them represents a gap in the archaeological record, a chapter missing from the Book of Kings. To understand why their burials are absent, we have to look at how politics and religion intertwined with eternity. One group especially vulnerable to erasure were the so-called intermediate dynasties, rulers who came to power in times of chaos. Egypt's long history is divided not only into grand dynasties, but also into periods of instability when rival claimants fought for the throne. Kings of these fractured eras often ruled only a few years, their legitimacy contested, their monuments quickly defaced once rivals gained control. Many of their tombs, if they were ever built, have yet to be identified. The sands might still hold them, modest burials stripped of names but waiting to be uncovered. There are also the co-regents, figures who shared power with reigning pharaohs but did not always survive in memory. A son might rule alongside his father for a time, or a wife might hold authority in partnership with her husband. When dynasties shifted, those figures could be erased. Their images were chiseled away, their titles stripped, their tombs left unfinished. What remains today are faint traces on damaged walls, suggesting rulers who are meant to vanish. If any of their tombs are found, they would expand the map of Egyptian authority, showing how power was shared and contested behind the official story. Some of the most haunting examples are the so-called lost queens. Women played crucial roles in dynastic politics, yet their burials often disappeared. Beyond Hatshepsut and Nefertiti, dozens of royal wives and daughters remain missing. They may have been buried in small chapels now destroyed, or in tombs deliberately hidden. Rediscovering one of these women could open new windows into royal life. Jewellery, clothing, letters, the kinds of personal objects placed in their graves, would humanise figures who today are little more than names in king lists. It's important to remember that deliberate erasure was not only about individuals, it was also about ideology. When a dynasty seized power, it often rewrote the past. Monuments of rivals were torn down, temples rededicated, tombs usurped. Archaeologists have found sarcophagi where one ruler's name was carefully scraped away, and another's inscribed in its place. Even in death, pharaohs were not safe from politics. Their eternity could be stolen and reassigned. In such cases, the original tomb owner becomes a ghost, replaced by the usurper. To identify one of these erased figures today would be like giving them back the name denied to them 3,000 years ago. The scale of this erasure can be seen in the Amarna aftermath. Akhenaten's successors worked hard to obliterate his memory, but collateral damage fell on others too. Smenkhare, a mysterious co-regent who may have ruled briefly after Akhenaten, remains a shadowy figure. His tomb has never been found. Some suggest he may even have been Nefertiti under another name, ruling for a short time before Tutankhamun. If Smenkhare existed as a distinct ruler, his burial would be an extraordinary discovery, one that could clarify one of the most confusing transitions in Egyptian history. The missing tombs of erased pharaohs remind us that history is written by survivors. What we know today is filtered through the successes of those who managed to hold power long enough to carve their names deep into stone. Those who lost the struggle were often cast aside, but the desert has a way of preserving what human hands tried to destroy. In shattered statues, in buried reliefs, in hidden tombs, fragments survive. Archaeologists piece these together like detectives reconstructing a crime scene. Each new find has the potential to restore someone who was meant to disappear. Imagine, for a moment, stumbling into a chamber that holds the burial of one of these forgotten rulers. The walls covered in hastily plastered reliefs, names half erased but still legible. The sarcophagus chipped where a usurper tried to claim it, yet the original hieroglyphs faintly shining through. Around the chamber, artifacts hastily hidden, perhaps broken, but enough to sketch the story of a dynasty that official history tried to bury. Such a discovery would not just expand our list of rulers, it would restore individuality, bringing back voices deliberately silenced. The question of erasure also raises deeper reflections about power. Why did rulers fear the memory of their predecessors so much? The Egyptians believed that the afterlife was sustained by remembrance. To speak a name was to keep a soul alive. To erase it was to condemn that soul to oblivion. In this way, erasure was the ultimate political act, killing not just the body but the legacy. Tombs were central to this struggle. A pharaoh's tomb was a fortress of memory. Destroying it was like burning a library, removing not only a person but their place in time. Archaeology today is in a sense the reversal of that erasure. Every time a hidden tomb is uncovered, every time a name scratched away is read again, the ancient act of condemnation is undone. Figures who were meant to vanish are remembered once more. This is why the missing tombs of erased pharaohs are so compelling. They are not just lost structures, they are injustices waiting to be corrected, stories waiting to be told again. To find one would be to restore someone's eternity, to give them back the voice denied by their enemies. As we consider all the missing tombs still beneath Egypt's sands, those of the erased pharaohs carry a special weight. They remind us that history is fragile, shaped by power as much as by truth. They whisper that the story of Egypt is not finished, that there are rulers still hidden in silence, waiting to be acknowledged, and they challenge us with a haunting thought. Perhaps the greatest discoveries are not of kings we know, but of those we have forgotten entirely. For centuries, the search for Egypt's tombs was guided mostly by instinct and luck. Explorers followed rumours, traced half-buried walls, or dug where the ground looked promising. Sometimes they stumbled on treasures, other times they uncovered nothing but sand. But in recent decades, the tools of archaeology have changed dramatically. What once depended on the eye and the shovel now relies on physics, satellites, and even particles from outer space. The desert, silent for so long, has begun to reveal its secrets under the gaze of technology. One of the most important breakthroughs has been ground-penetrating radar. By sending electromagnetic waves into the soil and measuring the reflections, archaeologists can detect hidden structures without lifting a single grain of sand. In the Valley of the Kings, radar has been used to scan the cliffs and plains for anomalies, voids, chambers, or walls buried beneath the surface. Some scans suggest the presence of spaces that have never been explored, offering tantalizing clues that more tombs remain in the very heart of Egypt's royal necropolis. It is a far cry from the days when Carter relied on a waterboy's stumble to find Tutankhamun's staircase. Satellites have also revolutionized the hunt. From space, high-resolution imagery can reveal subtle changes in vegetation or soil patterns that point to buried structures. At Saqqara, near the Step Pyramid, satellite surveys identified outlines of tombs and temples invisible from the ground. Some of these have since been confirmed by excavation. The desert may look blank to the human eye, but from orbit it carries signatures of the past. Lines of buried walls change the way the sand heats in the sun. Collapsed chambers leave faint depressions. Satellites turn these whispers into maps, guiding archaeologists to sites that would otherwise remain unknown. Thermal imaging has added another dimension. By measuring differences in temperature on the surface, researchers can spot anomalies caused by underlying structures. Stone chambers retain heat differently than loose sand. In 2015, thermal scans of the Great Pyramid at Giza revealed unexplained hotspots, suggesting hidden cavities within its vast bulk. Though the meaning of these anomalies is debated, they remind us that even monuments studied for centuries may still hold secrets invisible to the naked eye. Perhaps the most astonishing technology of all is muon tomography. Muons are subatomic particles created when cosmic rays strike the Earth's atmosphere. They rain down constantly, passing through matter with ease, but dense structures like stone slow them slightly. By placing sensitive detectors inside or around a monument, scientists can measure how muons pass through and create an image of hidden spaces. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project used this method to confirm a massive void inside the Great Pyramid, a space at least 100 feet long, previously unknown. It was a reminder that even the most iconic structure in Egypt is not fully understood. If such a chamber could remain hidden there, how many more might be waiting in the valleys and cliffs beyond? The implications for tomb hunting are enormous. For the first time, archaeologists can peer beneath the desert without destroying it. They can identify where to dig, and just as importantly, where not to. Every excavation risks damaging what it seeks to uncover. Technology allows for precision, reducing the need for blind digging and focusing efforts where they matter most. It means the sands of Egypt are no longer an impenetrable veil. They're a landscape being scanned, mapped, and slowly revealed. One of the most striking recent examples came not in the Valley of the Kings, but in Saqqara. In 2020, archaeologists announced the discovery of dozens of sealed coffins buried deep in shafts. What made the find remarkable was not only the coffins themselves, beautifully preserved, painted with vivid colours after more than 2,000 years, but the way they were detected. Ground-penetrating radar had revealed the shafts, leading the team to dig precisely where the coffins lay. The find captured headlines worldwide, a vivid demonstration of how new tools are transforming old mysteries. These technologies also allow researchers to revisit known sites with fresh eyes. The tombs of the Valley of the Kings have been mapped and remapped for more than a century, but subtle anomalies continue to suggest that hidden chambers might still be there. KV62, the tomb of Tutankhamun, remains at the centre of speculation. Even after the controversy around Nefertiti, radar surveys keep hinting at spaces that may or may not exist. Skeptics caution against overinterpretation, but the very fact that the valley still produces anomalies shows that its story is far from complete. What is striking is how these discoveries are often less dramatic than treasure-filled chambers, but no less important. A void detected by muons, a faint outline in satellite imagery, a heat anomaly on a pyramid. These are not gold or jewels, but they are clues, subtle signals that the past is still present beneath the surface. They remind us that Egypt is not exhausted. that its ancient landscape is still alive with secrets. The Valley of the Kings has long been the heart of Egypt's royal burials, and today it is also the heart of technological exploration. Archaeologists working there no longer rely solely on chisels and brushes. They carry radar equipment, thermal sensors, and digital mapping tools. Each scan of the cliffs produces data that can be fed into models, creating three-dimensional maps of what lies beneath the surface. The valley is no longer just a landscape of stone and sand, it has become a layered archive, revealed slice by slice through science. One of the most intriguing surveys took place in 2017, when researchers used ground-penetrating radar to scan areas near known tombs. They detected anomalies suggesting hollow spaces in the bedrock, potential corridors or chambers. Though these anomalies have yet to be fully explored, they demonstrate that the valley may still hold burials hidden beneath centuries of rock slides and flood debris. For more than 100 years, people assumed the valley was mostly mapped. Technology is proving that assumption premature. Another example comes from the cliff surrounding Deir el-Bahari, the site of Hatshepsut's mortuary temple. Here, radar scans and infrared imaging have revealed voids that could be tombs of priests or lesser royals. Excavations are ongoing, but already the work shows how much of the Theban necropolis remains untouched. The famous monuments are only the beginning. The surrounding hills are honeycombed with mysteries waiting for attention. Digital tools have also revolutionized how known tombs are studied. High-resolution scanning allows archaeologists to examine every inch of decorated walls, revealing details invisible to the eye. Faint traces of erased names can be reconstructed digitally, restoring figures who were once condemned to silence. In some cases, this has even revealed the outlines of earlier inscriptions beneath later ones, showing how tombs were usurped and recarved. Technology is not just finding new tombs, it is rewriting the stories of tombs we thought we already understood. Recent finds show how effective these methods can be. In 2021, archaeologists working at Saqqara uncovered a network of burial shafts leading to sealed coffins, statues, and papyri. Some of these finds were announced as belonging to high-ranking officials, complete with inscriptions that preserved their names and titles. What made this possible was the guidance of ground surveys and satellite mapping, which indicated where shafts were likely to be. The result was not a random dig, but a targeted operation that opened a new chapter in Egypt's story. Even in Luxor, the desert keeps surprising us. In 2019, a tomb was uncovered containing dozens of intact coffins, their colours bright and their inscriptions clear. The discovery was hailed as one of the most important of the decade. What struck many observers was how easily such a tomb could have been missed. It lay beneath a thin crust of sand, invisible for centuries. Without systematic surveys and patient scanning, it might still be hidden today. Each of these finds reinforces the same message: Egypt is not finished. Its deserts remain filled with sealed doors. Perhaps the most dramatic potential lies in combining different technologies. A radar scan may show an anomaly. Thermal imaging may confirm a temperature difference. Muon tomography may reveal a void. Together they create a case strong enough to justify excavation. This layered approach minimizes risk and maximizes results. It allows archaeologists to dig with purpose rather than chance, preserving more of the past while uncovering what lies hidden. These tools also expand the scale of exploration. Instead of focusing only on the most famous sites, researchers can scan wide areas quickly, identifying places worth closer study. Vast stretches of desert once considered barren are now being mapped in detail. Some surveys have already revealed traces of long-lost settlements, roads, and cemeteries. Egypt's hidden past is not limited to royal tombs, it includes entire communities waiting to be rediscovered. What is most remarkable is that every new discovery seems to spark another. The coffins found at Saqqara led to fresh excavations that revealed more shafts, more artifacts, more stories. The void detected in the Great Pyramid opened new debates about what might still lie inside. Each find is a reminder that the sands are not exhausted. They still hold enough to surprise even the most seasoned archaeologists. It is tempting to imagine what these technologies might uncover in the coming years. A radar scan could locate a chamber holding an erased pharaoh. A muon detector might reveal a hidden gallery in the cliffs of the Valley of the Kings. A satellite might trace the outline of a lost temple complex beneath the sand. The possibilities feel endless, and as long as Egypt continues to be studied, the chances of such discoveries remain very real. The desert may appear silent, but technology has shown us that silence is deceptive. Beneath the stillness lies a landscape alive with echoes, structures, and chambers. Each signal picked up by a radar, each faint shift in temperature, each muon slowed by stone is another whisper from the past. Piece by piece, Egypt is revealing itself, and each revelation brings us closer to the tombs that remain hidden. The sands of Egypt have never truly fallen silent. Every generation seems to uncover something that reshapes our understanding, as though the desert parcels out its secrets slowly, piece by piece. What makes this landscape so extraordinary is not just the monuments already known, but the sense that the story is still incomplete. For every tomb discovered, there are others still sealed. For every name we can trace, there are rulers and queens who remain invisible, their voices buried beneath rock and sand. The discovery of KV5 in the 1990s reminded the world just how deceptive the Valley of the Kings can be. For more than a century, archaeologists believed they had mapped it thoroughly. Then, in the shadow of Ramesses II's great temple, an unassuming shaft led to a labyrinth, a tomb built for the sons of a pharaoh, stretching with corridors and chambers in every direction. It turned out to be one of the largest tombs ever found in Egypt, hidden in plain sight all along. The lesson was clear: the desert can conceal more than we imagine, even in places we think we already know. Saqqara has offered similar surprises. In recent years, the necropolis south of Cairo has yielded sealed coffins stacked in shafts, untouched for more than 2 millennia. The paint was still bright, the inscriptions clear, the wood intact. These were not the grand burials of kings, but the tombs of priests and officials, preserved against all odds. Each find added texture to our picture of Egyptian life, showing that the sands keep not only royal secrets, but the stories of ordinary lives that supported dynasties. Even small discoveries carry weight. A fragment of papyrus, a forgotten amulet, a carved shard of limestone. Each can open a new chapter of history. These objects remind us that Egypt's desert is not barren. It is a vast archive waiting to be read. Somewhere out there are tombs of missing pharaohs, sealed chambers of queens, caches of scrolls, and treasures meant to last for eternity. They are still in place, waiting for the moment when they return to light. What makes this especially compelling is the unpredictability of discovery. Tutankhamun's tomb was found after years of fruitless searching, revealed only because a water boy stumbled on a step. KV5 lay unnoticed until persistence uncovered its scale. The Saqqara coffins came to light thanks to radar scans. Each find seems to appear at the crossroads of patience, chance, and determination. This unpredictability is what keeps the fascination alive. The desert does not surrender its secrets easily, but when it does, the results are unforgettable. As technology advances, the odds of uncovering these hidden tombs grow stronger. But even with radar, satellites, and muon detectors, there remains the element of mystery. The desert decides when to give up its treasures. Archaeologists may guide the search, but ultimately the sands reveal what they choose. That sense of patience, of waiting, is part of what gives Egypt its aura. The pharaohs may be gone, but their presence lingers, sealed in chambers where no light has entered for thousands of years. What lies still buried beneath Egypt's sands may be greater than anything already uncovered. We picture the golden mask of Tutankhamun, the painted coffins of Saqqara, the colossal tombs of Seti and Ramesses, but these may only be glimpses of what remains. Somewhere out there could be chambers larger than KV5, caches of scrolls that rewrite the history of dynasties, or the intact burial of a ruler thought lost to time. The thought that such things still exist, untouched for thousands of years, is what makes Egypt feel alive, as if its past is not over, but waiting to be continued. Imagine, for a moment, stepping into the tomb of a pharaoh erased from history. The walls covered in plaster, names half scraped away but still visible under the light. The sarcophagus cracked but sealed, containing a body that has not seen daylight in 3,000 years. The air heavy with the scent of resins, the silence broken only by footsteps echoing in chambers built for eternity. That moment of revelation, of reconnecting with someone deliberately forgotten, would be more than archaeology. It would be the resurrection of memory itself. Then there are the great names we still chase. Nefertiti, hidden perhaps behind walls in the Valley of the Kings. Cleopatra, resting in a temple of Osiris or beneath the waters of Alexandria. Imhotep, deified as a god but still missing as a man. Each of these figures represents not only a missing tomb, but a missing piece of the story. To find even one would change our perspective. To find all of them would be to redraw the map of Egyptian history. The allure is not only in the treasures or the inscriptions, but in the intimacy of discovery. A tomb is a place built for a single person's journey into the afterlife. To open it is to walk into their world, to see what they valued, what they feared, what they hoped would carry them into eternity. Every object, from a golden amulet to a carved wooden comb, is a whisper of humanity across the millennia. These are not just artifacts, they are reminders that the pharaohs were people who lived, loved, ruled, and died, and whose stories are still waiting to be told. In the coming years, technology will continue to open doors that have remained closed for millennia. Radar will probe deeper, satellites will map wider, and cosmic particles will draw outlines in stone. Each scan adds to a growing sense that Egypt is far from exhausted. But technology is only part of the story. The desert itself, with its silence and patience, decides when to reveal what it holds. That tension between control and chance, between science and mystery, is what keeps the search endlessly fascinating. The truth is that Egypt has always thrived on mystery. From Herodotus writing of giant ants digging gold, to Napoleon's scholars marvelling at ruins half buried in sand, the land has inspired wonder in every age. The missing tombs are part of that legacy. They are the unanswered questions that keep the story alive. Perhaps it is fitting that some of the greatest rulers, those who shaped religion, defied empires, or rewrote tradition, are still hidden. Their presence in the dark ensures that Egypt's history remains open-ended, a puzzle with pieces still missing. And so we return to the central question. Who is still out there, waiting beneath the sand? Is it Nefertiti, whose face has become a symbol of Egypt itself? Is it Cleopatra, the queen who ended 3,000 years of pharaohs in a single act of defiance? Is it an unknown king, a forgotten dynasty, a name erased so thoroughly that only a sealed chamber could bring it back? The answer lies somewhere in the cliffs and deserts, in valleys carved by hand and buried by time. What we know for certain is that Egypt's story is not finished. Every coffin raised from the sand, every inscription uncovered, every anomaly scanned adds another thread to a tapestry still being woven. The sands are not silent, they are simply waiting. Somewhere beneath them, in darkness unbroken for millennia, the pharaohs still lie, surrounded by the treasures of their time, their names poised to be spoken once again. The sands of Egypt have not finished speaking, and beneath them the pharaohs still wait. Thank you so much for watching.